Hi guys, my name is Sean. I'm a houseplant enthusiast from Jakarta, Indonesia. I like to nerd out to the science behind how we can keep our houseplants happy and to multiply them in our homes. So if you're into that kind of content, please do subscribe to my channel and send me likes. So today's video is going to be all about moss poles, what they are, why our plants need them, and how do we train our plants up the moss pole. So I did mention in my soil video that moss poles are considered as a growing medium actually for plants. A lot of epiphytes actually require it to climb up. This is so that they can get bigger leaves and also more fenestration as they climb up the moss pole. And this is just to replicate their natural habitat where, like for example, the famous Monstera deliciosa, it would have juvenile form leaves. In nature, it would climb up the trees and its roots will attach to anything, whether it's rocks or other trees. They would grab onto those and then it will just keep climbing up. And as it climbs up, it will just get bigger and leaves as it reaches out to better light source. And we want to replicate that in our home because our leaves are going to stay relatively small if you don't allow it to climb. In fact, a lot of the species like your pothos and scindapsus, they will also your Monstera adansonii, they tend to droop down, not droop down, they tend to trail down. And when you allow them to trail down instead of climbing up, it will give you smaller and smaller leaves until you have like super minuscule leaves in the end. And another reason for you to consider having a moss pole is so that they don't grow into an unruly mess, so that they are kept at the vertical element, so you can obviously get more plants for the same space that you have. And the plants are seriously going to be much happier with that arrangement as well. The moss pole that I have here are actually very affordable, as under $2 per moss pole, and it's largely made of coconut coir. And I believe this black one, I can't remember what material it's made of. It's also a natural fiber. The black one, it costs a little bit more than the coconut coir here. And they also come in different lengths. Usually they have this PVC water pipe underneath that was just cut, and people just stick that in into the moss pole. And you would want to obviously jam this into this potting mix and in your pot very carefully, and then you want to keep stuffing the pot with medium until it's secure, because otherwise it's gonna get loose and it's gonna topple off. So yeah, that's how you would install a moss pole. I usually prepare moss poles immediately after I propagate plants because I wanted to set them up for success immediately. Imagine if you had, sorry, there's an ant crawling around me. If you have a pot that's already established and all the roots are root bound in there, and you jam a moss pole in there, you're going to disturb the roots a lot. So I always start my plants when they are young. So let's get started. First of all, we have this Variegated Monstera here. As you can see, some of the aerial roots are actually unruly. It missed the moss pole entirely and it just was clambering all over the place. But for the most part, the roots are actually attached to the moss pole. And you want to actually tie the plant when it was a bit younger onto the moss pole, where the aerial root, which is usually behind the stem, is kissing the moss pole. Once it feels the presence of the pole, it will start to grab into it. And one of the triggers for aerial roots to take over a moss pole is, one, obviously the surface contact, and number two is the humidity or the moisture. So if this gets rained on, or I actually miss this every day or 2 to 3 times a day, or it just get rained on, the moss pole is going to stay relatively wet, and the aerial roots is going to find it and it's going to grip onto it pretty solidly. So I actually do that with my plants in the beginning. When it was younger, I just tied on, and then once it's grabbed onto the moss pole, I just leave it alone. It's just going to find its own way up to the top. And a lot of you guys are asking what to do when your plants reach the top of the moss pole like this one. Well, I guess I'm going to propagate it. Or another thing that you can do is you can get a bigger moss pole. You can get a second one and just stick it. I've seen some huge moss pole where it's like a few meters tall, but obviously I'm not going to do that. You can also cut back the plant when it reaches like an impossible height, and you can propagate the plant. Or what you want to do is, since, as you can see here, these are small leaves, and as the leaves get bigger and bigger, I can just cut the top 3 leaves off and start over the plant. So the plant was going to start with 3 big leaves, and then I'm going to give it another moss pole. So it's going to continue to climb up this way. And over here we have a Monstera deliciosa that's in round form. This is actually very rare here in Indonesia. I know that it's common in the States. And it's already grabbed onto the moss pole, which is amazing. I just had this for about a month actually. So I just basically yeah, I tied it over here so that the aerial roots are kissing the moss pole. And I have it outdoors, that's why it gets rained on pretty often. I also spray it down almost every day when I'm watering my plants. So yeah, it's really grabbed on really well into the moss pole. And it's going to continue to climb, and it's going to give me huge leaves. Yeah. And over here we have a Cebu blue. I got rainwater in my eye. Fiddly fake water. Alright, sorry you had to see that. I don't know if you can see my face. There's too many things going on this table. You don't have to see my face though. Yeah, so this is the Epiphytic Cebu blue, and a lot of you guys are growing them as a trailing plant, which means they're gonna bush out, they're gonna trail beautifully. It's got this really beautiful blue sheen to it. However, what I did was I grew this plant from a cutting, I would say about 9 months ago, and as it grew, I kept circling around in the pot, letting its aerial root into the pot, and when it's ready, I actually prepared a moss pole for it, and then I started to tie it right here. I can see one tie, two tie. I only tied it up to here. The rest of this plant is just its own doing. So after a few secure location, as you can see, the roots are actually everywhere around this plant. And the result of that is, look at these big leaves. They're getting bigger and bigger, and it's getting fenestrated. So the Cebu blue leaves can get huge, it can get enormous. So what happens when this reaches to the end of the moss pole is that I can actually set it free, set it to a tree or a wall where it can continue to climb up. Or I can just take cutting from the top few leaves and start over in the bottom so that the leaves are just continuously going to get bigger and bigger. So this is why moss poles are very important for aroids. And over here actually we have a hack that I found. Not only is this Philodendron hashtagum climbing up a moss pole, because it's actually giving me regular sized leaves. It's not giving me those big leaves. That's why I gave it something to climb on. I also wrapped this in moss pole. Sorry, I wrapped this in sphagnum moss. And then the aerial roots in each node of this plant will root into the moss pole, into the sphagnum moss, and it will encourage a lot of roots in there. It will encourage better grip, and it will get. I need to secure this actually. This is like flopping over. Yeah. So the key of not having moss poles flopping over is to just carefully, of course, jam soil potting mix in there to make sure that it's really full inside. And I use my aroid soil mix anyway, so it's very airy in there. So yeah, this is gonna grow faster and bigger leaves in no time. Last but not least, here's the Philodendron sharoniae, which actually I'm gonna show you later how I wrap this in moss. But yeah, the roots actually are already grabbing onto the moss pole, but here's another thing. I'm actually going to propagate this soon. I think I haven't decided yet. So when I'm wrapping this up in moss, not only am I encouraging more roots that's going to grip the moss, but it's going to absorb nutrients better. It's going to grow the plant better when it's got more roots. What was my point? Hang on. Oh yeah, I can also propagate it, which means that when I cut this plant up into sections, that node already would have viable roots for me to just continue to plant on in a new pot, the cutting I mean. So yeah, that's moss pole will also enable you to do what we call this air layering propagation easily. And here we have the Philodendron Varicosum, and they're well known for having to climb. I lost a lot of leaves, and actually there's some bacteria damage here, so I have to keep spraying this with fungicide, pesticide, and also bacteria formula, because I think it's got some kind of attack. And I'm also treating the soil for pests, because this had mealybugs in the soil before. Anyways, I digress. Look at how cute the new growth is. Beautiful color. And with this plant, when you allow it to climb up, the leaves are gonna get bigger and bigger. And I noticed that I got this plant as a tiny leaf actually. So, and over here we have a Epiphytic skeleton key, and as you can see, I let it climb up. The moss poles rooting pretty nicely. And the new leaves are starting to give me these signature tails that come with the skeleton key. If I didn't let this climb up, it will continue giving me tiny leaves. So yeah, it's gonna get much bigger leaves in no time. And over here is the Philodendron Brantianum, and as you can see, it actually naturally wants to climb onto something and just grow upwards, and it can get much bigger leaves than this. And right behind that is this Philodendron Parasol Verde, and also preparing this plant up for cutting. So I'm putting sections where the node is into moss, so I'm wrapping that up so it's going to root beautifully. But as you can see up here, this is the new growth point, and the roots are actually already, let me get this out of the way for you. Yeah, the roots are actually already secured to the moss pole. I don't even have to tie this plant onto the moss pole anymore. So yeah, life finds a way. Here we have an Emydrium medium, and it's like vining all around the moss pole. And I actually tied it in multiple points along the moss pole. I even twisted it, bent it down because it's got a lot of runners, and I tied it downwards and up and around. So it's just a lot of plant material that's like seriously attaching itself to the moss pole. And this is a very healthy plant. It's growing very profusely. And imagine if I didn't tie it into a moss pole, it would be insane. Look at all these runners that it has. And all the runners are actually going to grip. All the nodes are going to grip into the moss pole. So this is one way that you can control unruly plants. And Emydriums are particularly unruly. Talking about unruly Emydriums, here's the Zipilanium. And it's giving me a lot of runners. Look at this. I kind of like it. It's like little fireworks in the middle of nowhere, and there's another one here, there's some over here. They're just kind of like hanging out. But what they're truly trying to do is they're trying to climb up. They're trying to find something to grab onto, like a wall or a tree. If they do grip onto something, the internodes are going to be shorter, and then it will have more leaves along the nodes. Alright, so here is a pothos enjoy. It's an epiphytic, and as you can see, when you let it go down, the leaves are gonna get much smaller than it was. So if up here I actually kept looping the plant around into the pot, so there's actually a lot of, as you can see, a lot of root material here. It's a very bushy plant, but it got so full that it just has to trail down. Actually, in nature, they would also want to, here's a pothos enjoy. Look at how big these leaves are. So it's trying to climb up. So when it's climbing up, it's going to get huge leaves. In fact, the leaves can get like monster size. And by the way, there's no right or wrong answer here. The tiny leaves are also beautiful. And if you want to encourage bigger leaves, obviously, one of the trick is to, again, to just loop it around and run into the pot so that it just has a lot of roots. It's really gonna grip into the media, or just give it a moss pole to climb onto, then it will get bigger leaves in no time. Here's a variegated Adansonii, and I've actually prepared a moss pole, and here you can see it's just starting to train. I didn't even have to tie this plant onto the moss pole, but it's already feeling the moss pole, and the next node here will also just keep gripping into the moss pole, and it's just going to continue growing up without me having to do anything. And again, it's going to give me bigger and maybe more variegated leaves because it's reaching out to more light. And as you can see here, this is a quite beautiful variegation on this one. So yeah, if I allowed this plant to vine down instead of climb up, it's just going to give me smaller leaves. Like, look at how small these leaves are. So yeah. And I wanted to take you on a preview to see some of the plants that are in training. Those Rhaphidophora are going to climb up a moss pole, and those over there, Philodendron Brazils and Scindapsus. And Scindapsus also responds really well to climbing up a moss pole. So yeah, so these babies are going to be huge one day, hopefully. Now here is a Philodendron atabapoense, and I didn't give it a moss pole. So as you can see, let me take this out actually. As you can see, it's kind of like toppling over, and all these roots here are trying to cling onto something. And it's a good thing that there are actually a lot of plants here that is catching its fall, because if it grew a few more leaves and I didn't give it a moss pole, this whole plant will just topple over, and it's not going to be very sexy. So yeah, I may actually propagate this plant into like a few pieces. Look how big this leaf is. Yeah, because I think this is a plant that we really would need a moss pole. Just look at that, it's just like hanging over. Ooh, and in this case, I think it's actually hard to teach old dogs new tricks, because once the aerial roots are formed like this, it's very hard to train them up a moss pole. I mean, you can try, but it's much better to start them when they were young, if you get what I mean. And in this case, it's better for me to just propagate over and then take the baby leaves and up a moss pole, because I'm just super patient like that. Look at how beautiful this leaf is. I can't stop staring at it. Whoa. Nice. So I'm going to show you how I wrap this sharoniae in sphagnum moss. And as you can see here, the aerial roots are shooting out here and there. It will grab onto the pole naturally, but I want it to not only grab onto the pole, I want it to be a part of the pole. So I'm going to give it some sphagnum moss. First, let me cut some cotton twine over here. And the moss is, I find that it's better to work with damp moss, by the way. And sometimes it's actually hard to propagate them when they're so well rooted into the moss at the same time, because yeah, the moss, the roots would have tangled up like crazy inside the plant. Well, of course, I'm like losing the sphagnum. It's falling all over the place. Hang on, this is not the right way to do it. Hang on, didn't think this through. Let me get a much longer piece. I'm going to start just tying a dead end somewhere. All right, and then after that, that's when I start introducing the moss. Just kind of loop it round and round, the stem. It's caught onto my Raphidophora. Okay, and I think I'm pretty happy. I'm just gonna tie this up. Sometimes I just leave like a long tail here, because what I can do is I can just continue going up when it's got the next node. So I'm just gonna leave that there, and yeah, so that's done. So this is the plant that we're working with today, and I wanted to quickly show you. It's after the rain, so this plant is actually water propagating itself. I guess in nature this is what happens. The roots would get in touch with humidity and moisture, and then it will take off, and it will make it a stronger plant, allows it to climb. And also if you sever it at some point, that plant will still survive, will keep thriving without the parent plant. So I'm going to take this golden pothos, and I wanted to actually stake it up onto a moss pole, because I want them to get that huge leaves. And it wouldn't get that if I didn't stake it up. So yeah, let me get started with this. First of all, let me unpot him from the small pot. I bet it's super root bound. I meant to repot it a long time ago. So let me wiggle it out of the way. Hang on. Okay. I see mealybugs in there. Oops. I see roots, and I also see mealybugs. If you haven't seen my mealybugs video, do check that out. I'm not stressed out when I see them. They can be destroyed pretty effectively with neem oil, and also I use a bit of chemical insecticide. Beautiful. Look at this. They're so root bound down there. Oh my god. Okay, so I'm gonna give it a pot. I'm gonna show you what I'm gonna do. I have a plan for it. I'm gonna start putting in some aroid soil mix in here. Or you know what? I'm actually going to use general purpose instead. Gonna get my moss pole. The first thing that you want to do is actually give it a moss pole first. The table is like wet. It just rained, and it really sucks to work with a wet table when you're working with soil, because all the soil is gonna be wet and it's gonna stick to your hands. Okay, so I didn't fill this up all the way to the top because what I want to do is, oh gosh, this is messier than I imagined. So this is one hack for you to grow your pothos or any vining plants in a more bushy way. Is to just loop it around in there. So as you can see here, there are a lot of aerial roots. Just stick them back into the soil. Don't cut up the plant, just stick. It's a way of self-propagating the plant. And there's two ways you can do this. For me, I like to do this so that there's a lot of roots and the plant's going to grow so much faster because it's got a lot of roots. It's going to push new growth out of that apical bud. If you haven't seen my apical dominance video, check that out. And then it's going to grow faster and bigger leaves. At the same time, if you decide that you want a bushier plant and the plant has rooted after you've looped it around in the pot, go ahead and cut between the nodes, because now each leaf will give you a whole new plant, because each leaf and a node would have rooted in there, right? So that's one way for you to get a very bushy pothos in no time without propagating it. And when you do this, you want to make sure the leaves are kind of like the nodes are facing down into the potting mix and that the leaves are facing up, because the leaves still need to photosynthesize. So you don't want to have the leaves facing down where possible. So what I'm going to do is, in this particular vine that I have, I've looped it one time around, and I think I'm near the end. I don't know if you can see, I'm near the end of the vine. I'm gonna start putting it up onto the pole. And you want to really make sure that the aerial roots are kissing the moss pole. All right, and as it grows up, I may have to do a few more ties to make sure that it's climbing up properly. Actually, you know what? There's too many vines here that are trying to climb up. So hang on, let me think. I may actually just settle with one vine because I just want one giant leaf over here. So the others, no sweat. I'm just gonna cut it right off and I'm gonna propagate it. Ta-da! And let me fill it up with the potting mix. So make sure that the nodes are really buried in there, because as you recall, we have these vine looped around in the soil. And again, I want to remind you guys that the vine are going to push out roots into the soil. It's going to give you faster growing leaves. More, and I'm done. So all I need to do is add a little bit of slow release fertilizer and this is good to go. Nice. Now just give it time. So yeah, I'm gonna propagate the rest of these. I actually want a lot of these plants because they're really beautiful. So I guess that's all I have for you today about moss poles and setting your plants up into moss poles. I hope that it's informative. I hope that I was very clear, and I hope that you guys do train your plants up because they will truly be happier with that situation. I'm at Botanist on Instagram. If you have any questions about plant care and propagation, do DM me. I'll try to get back to you. Meanwhile, do take care and stay safe. I will see you in the next video. Bye!